You're muted, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. So nice to see you again after so long.
Yes. Nice to see you, Prabhu.
Thank you. I think the last time we met was in Oxford, if I remember right.
Was it?
Oh, yes.
That's possible. Which year would that have been?
It would have been 2001. Year 2001.
2001. Oh, that goes way back.
Way back.
That goes way back. You're in Dallas now?
Yes, I'm in Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. We are all set.
Okay, we're all set. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Kshetra Prabhu, Mother Jeshwari, can you tell me if we can get started now, or what should I do?
Yes, Prabhu, I think we can go ahead.
Okay. Hare Krishna, Vanchakapa Turvasya, Kripasindubhyevacha, Patitanam Pavanebhya, Vaishnavibhya, Namo Namaha. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending today's wonderful association with His Holiness Krishna Kshetra Swami Maharaj, who is gracing us for this wonderful remembrance of Srila Gurudev on the 20th anniversary of his disappearance. I'm going to first say something about Maharaj, and then I'll turn it over to Maharaj to speak after that. And everyone will have lots of opportunity to ask questions after Maharaj has spoken, and or bring up any points you'd like to about what Maharaj said. So Maharaj is a teacher, writer, and traveler. Is a very, very senior disciple of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, founder Acharya of International Society for Krishna Consciousness, or ISKCON as we know it. He has served as a missionary, temple priest, pujari, and counselor for Bhakti Yoga practitioners from the time of his formal initiation in 1972. From 1972 to 1976, he was based in Germany, the Netherlands, and Denmark. Then he began to participate in Vaishnava missionary activities in Central Europe. Almost every year from 1978 to 1995, he visited India on pilgrimage. In 1987, ISKCON's GBC body appointed him as an initiating guru. In 1995, as coordinator of a research group, he compiled and published Pancharatra Pradipa in 2 volumes, a manual for Chaitanya Vaishnava temple worship. He also served ISKCON's GBC as the minister for deity worship from then until 2005. In 2004, after 8 years of university study, which was resuming his interrupted studies from 1972, he received a PhD degree from the University of Oxford, St. Cross College, for his dissertation on Chaitanya Vaishnava image worship, now available from Routledge Publishers as Attending Krishna's Image, Chaitanya Vaishnava Murti, Chaitanya Vaishnava Murti Seva as Devotional Truth. The date is 2006, as a book in the Routledge Hindu Studies series. Krishna Kshetra Maharaj is now a research fellow of the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies. He also teaches at Bhaktivedanta College, Radhadesh, since 2002. He recently taught survey courses in Indian religions and Asian religions in the religion department at the University of Florida, Gainesville. Beginning in September 2007, he began teaching at Chinese University of Hong Kong, courses in Indian religion and culture. After a full year of teaching, he then continued to teach one semester per year for the next 4 years. Since then, he has been giving lectures at several universities in the People's Republic of China. As during several previous years, and now continuing after his taking formal sannyasa vows in Janmashtami of 2014, Krishna Kshetra Maharaj travels extensively for teaching, counseling, and to support spiritual communities in the Vaishnava devotional tradition. Welcome, Maharaj. We look forward to seeing you in Dallas also soon, now that I know that you're traveling again.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction, Prabhu. That last point about travel, of course, is not quite accurate for the last almost 2 years. I've been in basically one place. But yes, Krishna willing, maybe I can travel again some. Okay, so I'm not sure. Well, first, maybe I should ask for about how long should I speak and then open for discussion.
Generally, the idea is, Maharaj, that you speak for an hour and then open up for discussion. That's
okay.
As much as
Well,
now, if you like, but as much as now.
We'll see if I go that long. And is there something in particular you'd like me to start off with to sort of prompt me into motion, if you like? Should I speak about how I first met Goswami Maharaj, or?
That'd be very nice, man. That'd be very
okay. All right. Om Agyana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Tadati Swaparantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. First, I want to acknowledge those of you whom I know as being online. I'm happy to see you here, Kalachandji Prabhu, and we see Mother Jayabhadra and Vinod, and yes, all the devotees, many here whom I don't know, but thank you for this opportunity to speak, to remember Goswami Maharaj, His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami, who I had the good fortune of having, I would say, a lot of very good association, close association with in a certain period of time, mainly toward the end of his being present with us. Truth be told, I can't really say when I first met Maharaj. I would have seen him most probably in Mayapur the first time I went, or in Vrindavan, but I think Mayapur when I first went to India, which was 1978. And my memories of Maharaj in the next few years, whenever I would see him, was just seeing him from a distance, basically seeing him in action, and frankly feeling a certain a kind of fear. He seemed like such an imposing person, so sort of strong in his ways, which I didn't know how one might relate with. So I don't want to say that I avoided him, but our paths didn't really cross in a direct way until, as best I remember, 1988 in Vrindavan. At that time, the Vrindavan Institute of Higher Education was going, and I believe it had already been running since some years. I don't know how many, but it was running quite well. Burijan Prabhu, Danadar Swami, and Tamal Krishna Goswami were principal teachers in the Vrindavan Institute of Higher Education. And I remember the kind of, I don't want to say formula, but the basic idea that the organizers of Vrindavan Institute of Higher Education, the VIHE, hit upon was we simply get prominent personages, prominent devotees here to teach, and they will act like magnets, and they will bring devotees who will want to hear from them. And that's what they did, and that's it worked. And Tamal Krishna Goswami was one such magnetic teacher. As I remember, that year he taught a course on the Brahma Samhita. Now again, truth be told, I did not attend his class. I was attending another course with Danadar Swami on Srimad Bhagavatam. But nevertheless, we had a good amount of interaction, and in particular, a memorable feature was that Goswami Maharaj got the inspiration, and I don't know from whom, but he got the inspiration to follow Ekadashi in the full vrata as it's described in the Hari Bhakti Vilasa. Fasting entirely on Ekadashi, staying up all night that night, and then taking one meal the next day, I think was also part of the vrata. And Goswami Maharaj, whatever he did, he liked to involve the world. He liked to involve others around him. And so I was invited. He didn't want to do this vrata alone. That was kind of out of the question. If he's going to do this, he's going to do this with others. He's going to have others suffer with him. And so I was invited to join the vrata along with a few others. And that meant also joining with him that night in his house there in Vrindavan for the all-night vigil. And the all-night vigil was, as we all know, Goswami Maharaj, he was an organizer, he was a manager. And so the all-night vigil was highly structured, that there would be periods of chanting, of singing, and there would be periods of discussion. And during the periods of discussion, first there would be a list assembled of topics. What are we going to discuss? And he made a list. He would invite devotees to suggest a topic, and then that would go on the list. And the topics were, I don't remember specific topics, but they tended to be somewhat involving some controversy, something that was, engaging for the mind, something challenging, and they were topics which especially Goswami Maharaj was interested in, and he would often express strong thoughts on whatever the topic was. So because the topics were interesting, and because Goswami Maharaj was kind of presiding and keeping everything going, so we all kept awake very well. I remember that. So this happened, in my memory, we did it twice, but maybe I don't think we did it more than twice. Now, fast forward to 2000, the year 2000 perhaps, one of the times when I visited Goswami Maharaj in Cambridge at the famous Willow House that he rented, that was rented for him. I would visit him. There was a period when I would visit him sort of once a month over the weekend. I would take a bus from Oxford over to Cambridge. So one of these days that I was visiting him fell on an Ekadashi. And so before the Ekadashi, he would raise the issue that, okay, tomorrow is Ekadashi, what are we going to do? And I remember him saying, and we are not going to fast. There's no question of fasting. Don't even think about fasting. We're not fasting, okay? So anyway, his experiments with the strict vrata, all I remember is from that time in 1988 at the VIHE. It was also at that time, 1988, we were, I remember practically the exact spot where we were standing. We were on the second floor of the Gurukul building on one of the balcony corridors, talking about something. Maybe we were talking about the next Ekadashi plan, but at one point he kind of looked at me and he said, "How come you're not a sannyasi?" Now this was 1988, which is 90. It's 26 years before I actually took sannyas. So 1988, he looked at me and with this sort of heavy TKG question. How come you're not a sannyasi? And I didn't know how to answer him. And so I just kind of stood there, not saying anything. So there were a few moments of silence, and then I would say he diffused the issue. He said, anyway, it's okay. He said, Narada Muni and the 4 Kumaras, they were not sannyasis. So he was kind of thinking aloud that actually in our tradition, it's not that someone who is renounced has to take formal sannyas. So he said like that, anyway, Narada, the 4 Kumaras, they didn't take, so it's okay. So he kind of let me off the hook at that time, and that was the end of that conversation. I was relieved at the time because I certainly didn't feel ready to take sannyas at that time. It would have been also there in Vrindavan that it must have been that he invited me to come to China. And soon after that, I went to China. I got one of those round the world tickets, and decided, make a stop in Hong Kong. So I did that. I spent a week in Hong Kong, and then I went to, the devotees sent me to Guangzhou, near Hong Kong, and I was there for about a week with Nrsimha Maharaj, Bhakti Vigna Vinash Nrsimha Maharaj. Very nice time. And then, after about a week, Goswami Maharaj came together with Giridhari Swami Maharaj. And the 3 of us then flew to Xi'an, which is kind of central western North China, to meet some bhaktas who were showing some interest. This was 1989. By this time, the China mission was happening to some extent, but compared to years later, it was still very much in beginning stages. We came to we flew to Xi'an, and we came to this university, and we met these students. And to give you an idea of the situation in China at that time, on our way to meet, or maybe we had met the students, and the students took us to their residence, their dormitory. And on the way, I remember they took us through some sort of electronics laboratory, maybe where they were having some classes. And I just remember seeing this ancient equipment with vacuum tubes. Now, many devotees of present generation won't even know what that is. What's a vacuum tube? You won't see that in any electronic gadgets today. But this was full of these big boxes of stuff with big vacuum tubes. It was like from a previous, it felt like we were in a time warp of a previous century. Anyway, so we stayed in Xi'an. There wasn't a whole lot to do. We were checked into one very nice hotel. And then Goswami Maharaj said, well, let's tour the city. Let's see the sights. and devotees arranged for a car, and one of the local devotees or aspiring devotees became a tour guide. And we went to one Buddhist temple, and maybe we went to another Buddhist temple, and I don't think we went anywhere else. And Goswami Maharaj said, "This is boring. Let's go back." And that was it. That was the end of our tourism, our experience of tourism of Xi'an. We didn't go, Xi'an became famous because outside of Xi'an is this famous place where they have these ceramic kind of full-size soldiers. They're buried, hundreds of these soldiers. We didn't go there. Sort of like, who cares? Why bother? So, okay, back to the hotel. What to do? Chant. And, the challenges of cooking and eating were pretty phenomenal at that time. But then what happened was we were due to fly back, not back to Guangzhou, but to fly from there to Wuhan. Wuhan has now become famous because the origin of the COVID virus. We were scheduled to fly to Wuhan. But when we got to the airport, we had checked out of the hotel, and we had all our luggage, and we were in the airport. And then came the announcement that no planes are leaving because of the fog. And the fog was obvious. We were just kind of hoping against hope. But no, and they were saying when the fog lifts, then planes will go. So we were waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And we had to wait inside the airport because it was too cold to wait outside. This was must have been January or December. And it was too cold outside, but inside, I've never seen anywhere in the world where more people were smoking cigarettes more than in China, especially in that airport. So you can imagine with Goswami Maharaj. And any of you who ever traveled with Tamal Krishna Goswami, you know how challenging it could be if things didn't go just quite right with travel, right? It could be really challenging. But he was surprisingly peaceful, I must say. I mean, he was not happy. None of us were happy, but at least he was in this mood of, okay, we just have to tolerate this. There's nothing we can do. But finally, after some hours, we kept waiting, and Goswami Maharaj would send the devotee, go to the counter and find out what's happening. After some hours, we heard an airplane land. And Maharaj said, "Hey, what is this? An airplane's landing, it's still foggy, what's going on?" So then we got the news that, well, this is a larger plane, and the larger planes can come and go, but there's no such large plane going to Wuhan. All right, so then where are they going? Well, there's a plane that's going to Guangzhou. Okay, we're taking that plane. So that was the style. So we didn't go to Wuhan, we went back to Guangzhou. And that was my the only adventure I had with Goswami Maharaj in China. There was something else. Oh, where was that? Yeah, that would have been was it in Xi'an? It's interesting how memories sort of go blurry and get folded in with other thoughts. But I do remember, no, maybe it was Guangzhou. We went for a walk, and we walked by one restaurant where it was tables outside, and the people were sitting at the tables, and in a typical Chinese way, they had this, in German it would be called Eintopf. It was just one iron pot in the center of the table with some soup or some stew with a little fire underneath, I guess. And everyone would take from that pot. And I just remember Goswami Maharaj looking at that and thinking, that's really interesting. We should, learn from this. We should, maybe we should institute this. Maybe we should have a restaurant here in China that has a similar program. He was really interested in that particular restaurant business possibility. He liked that. Okay, so that's what I remember from China. Now, in going forward to 1994, or maybe early 95. How was it? I don't know, but I was in Gainesville, Florida, in the U.S., and Tamal Krishna Maharaj was also there. And I believe he was there for a North American GBC meeting. And I had been, over the last year, I would say, getting quite a lot of association with His Holiness Hridayananda Das Goswami. And Hridayananda Maharaj had been encouraging me to take up university study, to go back to university. He was, really enthusiastic. He himself was studying at Harvard University, and I had mentioned that I had dropped out of university at University of California in Berkeley. And maybe it was just a few days or weeks before this, I had met Hridayananda Maharaj at Gita Nagari. There was a Sangha, there was a kind of seminar event going on there. And we had been chatting about this. And then again, the subject came out, well, why don't you, go? And I said, well, I don't know what's the process even of getting readmitted to the university 20, how many years later? And he said, why don't you just go and find out? Well, we're in Gita Nagari. That's Berkeley. That's the other side of the country. Take a flight there. And then he said, hold on, maybe we can arrange for you to go. And he called up Brahmatirtha. Brahmatirtha is famous for collecting free flights. He has a particular way of doing it, because they have a way in America of overbooking a flight intentionally to make sure the plane is full. Economically, it works out for them that if there are extra people, they'll announce, we're overbooked. Is there anyone who will volunteer to stay back? We will give you a voucher for whatever, $200, or we'll give you a free ticket, whatever. And so, I don't know if I should be telling this, but Brahmatirtha Maharaj made this a kind of regular practice, that he would plan for this. He would, as soon as they would announce, he'd say, "Oh, I'll do that." And so he would kind of collect these extra tickets. Anyway, Hridayananda Maharaj called up Brahmatirtha. I'm getting a little off the subject, but it's leading to Tamal Krishna Maharaj. He called him up and said, "Hey, do you have any flights, from the East Coast to San Francisco?" And Brahmatirtha said, "Actually, yes, I do. I have something from Newark, New Jersey, which is not so far from." Yeah, so before I knew it, I was on a plane to California. Anyway, long story short, then I'm back, and I got the information, and it turned out it's really not so complicated to get back in the university. So now I'm meeting Tamal Krishna Maharaj in Gainesville, in Florida, and I'm just telling him about all of this. And then I said, why is all of this coming up? Well, there's Hridayananda Maharaj, but I said the other reason is that I've been spending some time in Mayapur, and in Mayapur, the leaders have been suggesting to me that I get involved in the process of creating a university in Mayapur. And I raised the objection. I said, I'm not myself academically qualified, so how could I, what could I do for that purpose? And the answer that I was given was, well, we don't really need to have academic qualifications. Our professors that we'll get for our universities, we will get retired Indian university professors. So I'm reporting this. I'm just telling this to Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And when I told him this, he slammed his hand on the table and said, "That's what's wrong with Mayapur." He said they're thinking like hippies. And then practically in the same breath, he said, "You should go back to school. You should go back to university." And he said it like a command. It was like, you just have to do this. Now, in retrospect, I understood something else, what was happening. In retrospect, I came to realize that Goswami Maharaj himself was thinking seriously of going back to university. And again, like with his, doing the Ekadashi Vrata, he's not going to do it alone. And so he wanted me to also do it, and then I would be at least one more person that he could compare notes with. And that's what happened. So he, for me, really tipped the scale. When he said, "You should go," I felt, okay, this is Krishna. I should just do it. At least I should try. At least see how it goes. So that's what I did. And then, soon after that, Goswami Maharaj began his taking up his academic revisit at Southern Methodist University. And soon after he was enrolled, he would call me up. And this became a very regular thing. I was I was in the university. He was also, it was actually some months later, it was when I moved to do a master's degree in Berkeley. Then he would call me up and basically he would say, so what's going on with you? What's happening? And what are you thinking? What's your experience? What are the intellectual challenges you're having? What are the theological, philosophical, he would drill, what's going on with you? And we would have discussions on this point. Here we are, followers of Srila Prabhupada, practicing Krishna bhakti, and here we are in the university, the place where it's all about cultivating skepticism to varying degrees, and where theology is practically taboo. Yes, there's study of religion, but it's a study of a very different sort, with a very different approach from within for practitioners. So a lot of our discussions were on this point of sort of wrestling with the issue of faith and reason, faith versus reason, reason and belief. Of course, Goswami Maharaj wrote these very wonderful essays and compiled them into a book. And before I forget, I dare to ask, I was asking around last few days and got no positive answer. If it's possible from anyone to get a digital copy of that book, I would be grateful. I have a physical copy in my with my books in Slovenia, but I'm traveling, and it would be so nice if I had a digital copy. Okay, that was just while I'm thinking of it. So this was a topic, that for us was kind of ongoing. And another topic was, two more. One was, he put it this way, how do we catch up? How do we catch up academically? What he was saying was that there's a whole tradition of academic study of religion. We were both in these departments, study of religion. It's been going on for decades. There's been volumes and volumes of books and stacks of learned articles in all different areas of the academic study of religion. And here we're coming in cold. We don't know anything. What do we know, though? We do know our own tradition, as we have been taught by our Acharya, by Srila Prabhupada. But beyond that, and to think in academic ways, critical thinking, historical thinking, all these different methodologies and so on, we were completely green. So he would say, how do we catch up? And I never had an answer. I said, well, we just do what we can, And the other question that Goswami Maharaj always raised was, what are we going to do after we finish? What are we going to do with our, degrees and whatever? And this was, as we all know, Goswami Maharaj was always very, for lack of a better word, intense in his ways. And so he was intensely thinking, what is he going to do after? And he had ideas, especially he gravitated toward the idea of a university in Mayapur, developing that. But from early on, he felt, no, Mayapur, no. Calcutta, yes. Or near Calcutta. Why? Because it's a city environment. Scholars are going to want to be where there's facility, library facility especially, and so on. Anyway, so these kind of discussions we had, and as I said, I would visit him sometimes in Cambridge. And as you all know, at one point he came to Oxford. He moved to Oxford. He had been, so to say, done his service in Cambridge. He had no need to be there physically all the time. When he needed to meet his supervisor, Julius Lipner, he could travel to Cambridge to meet him. But he was feeling a great lack of devotee association in Cambridge. And so he resolved to move to Oxford. And moving to Oxford was to all of our benefit. And so it became very easy to meet him. He took some austerity, I think, because he had this really very nice place to stay in Cambridge, this architect's house, the Willow House. So he gave that up to stay in a much smaller place in Oxford. But he had devotee association in Oxford because several of us were there with the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies, and so he was very happy about that. Let's see, there was something else I was going to speak about, but it slips my mind just now. Perhaps I can pause at this point and see if there's anything anyone wants to add in relation to something I've said, or maybe you want to ask something, but...
Maharaj, this is Yudhisthira. Please accept my obeisances.
Hare Krishna.
So, thank you so much. I just wanted to say that I totally related to the flight and airline stories, because for years I was fortunate to, well, I don't know, fortunate, but in the old days, you had to book the flights, and I don't know how many years I did that for, but you had to do it by phone.
Right.
And it took so long. And then, I remember booking an around the world flight with, so many stops, and then something happened and the whole reservation disappeared. So stories like that, I remember traveling with him, and his considerations were which way the sun, would be shining in the windows, whether you be on the, if it was flying north or south on the east, you had to book it so the sun wasn't shining in the window. So if it was a morning flight, sitting on the west side of the plane, and on the afternoon flight, the east side, and on and on and on. It's wonderful in hindsight. I'm very glad that part of the service is behind me, but if I could only do that again, I would be the happiest person on the planet.
Yeah. To the general point of traveling with Goswami Maharaj, one time, which year would have this been, in Mayapur, he invited me to go with him and a couple of other devotees in a car to Nrsimhapali. So we're on the road. This would have been in, I guess, late January, early February. It was around the time of Saraswati Puja. And if you've ever been in Mayapur around that time, you'll know that they celebrate Saraswati Puja. They take it quite seriously. And one way that they have their celebrations happen is that they collect funds by stopping cars on the street and sort of demanding you to give donations. And so we're in the car and we're on our way to Narsingapalli, and we get stopped. And I think they wanted 5 rupees. 5 rupees, come on, what's the problem? But Goswami Maharaj, what is this? Who is this? What do they want? Well, they want 5 rupees for Saraswati Puja. No, don't get, we have to, And it became a whole scene, And I couldn't remember if we ended up actually giving the money or not. And so the story continues now, jumping ahead to the very last, sadly, the very last occasion of Goswami Maharaj's visit to Bhaktivedanta Manor. I wrote about this in my article, which went into the Journal of Vaishnava Studies dedicated to his memory, that it was Vasant Panchami with the many acharyas, disappearance days, appearance days, and Saraswati Puja was. So my assignment, again, Tamal Krishna Maharaj assigned who is going to speak on what. So I was assigned to speak on Saraswati. And so I told this story to all the devotees that, I'd been with Maharaj in the car and we had been stopped and they wanted 5 rupees. And then in front of all the devotees, I asked Maharaj, so did we pay that 5 rupees? And Maharaj said very gravely, he said, I hope so. Yeah. Another thing regarding, well, maybe a couple of things, but also kind of a humorous story from Southern Methodist University. Of course, Maharaj immediately was sort of leapfrogged from there directly into a doctoral program at Cambridge, which was very unusual. But because his studies as an undergraduate at the University of Southern Methodist University were so outstanding, his main professor said he was the best student he'd ever had in 38 years or something. He was able to do that. But at Southern Methodist University, one of the courses he took, he was studying Sanskrit, beginning Sanskrit grammar and so on. And he took it, as everything else, he took very seriously. But then he came to Cambridge, and because he needed to concentrate on writing his dissertation, researching for it and writing, there wasn't going to be any possibility, I guess, for him to continue the Sanskrit. And he was very worried about this. He said, he called me up one day in Oxford. He said, what am I going to do about this? And it was like, now I have to solve his problem. What am I going to do about this? Give me the solution, And the problem was, he said, I'm going to forget my Sanskrit. It's going to go. And then I gave a few suggestions. I said, well, Maharaj, just, take a verse every day from Bhagavad Gita and analyze the grammar, how about, I said, take Brahma Samhita. You were going to be working on Brahma Samhita. He was writing that book and so on. And whatever I suggested to him, he would just I could see him through the phone shaking his head and saying, no, that's not going to work. No, that's not going to work. No, that's not going to work. So I kind of ran out of ideas. And then he said, the only way this is going to work is if we make a deal that we both do Sanskrit study every day for a certain amount every day. And we have to go by the honor system that if we miss one day, we have to pay the other a certain amount of money. And so then we worked out the details. It started, I said, okay, so, if I miss a day, so I pay you £1. He said, no, come on, £1, that's not enough. It's got to be £5. Okay, £5. And it's not for 7 days of the week, all right? It's for 5 days of the week, and it can be any 5 of the 7 days. So that was a condition. And it's going to be for minimum 45 minutes a day, but no more. So 45 minutes a day that we work on Sanskrit. Now for me this was easy because I was anyway working on translating part of the Hari Bhakti Vilasa. This was part of my, at the time, this was part of my doctoral research. So, I was anyway doing it, so okay. And then he finally said, and you can be sure, you can be 100% sure that I will never have to pay you £5. So in other words, he was making this deal in such a way for himself to keep himself, doing the Sanskrit. But it was in such a way. Money has got to be involved. We kept it up for at least a year, and then I went to India to do more research for my project, and then I think we kind of dropped it. But for that time, that was the deal. So I had a deal with Goswami Maharaj. The other thing I wanted to mention is that when I would visit Tamal Krishna Maharaj in Cambridge, he was working on his thesis, he was writing, and he would finish a draft of a chapter and he would print it out and he would give it to me to read and ask for my comments. And I never really had much to say other than, it's great, keep going, because his writing was so brilliant. He would kind of muse. He asked me, so what is your method of writing? He needed to know everything about what you do and how you think. And so, how do you write? And I'd say, well, maybe I write a paragraph and then I go through it. I do a rough draft and then I go through and gradually, polish it up. He said, what? He said, that's crazy. He said, I cannot finish one sentence and go on to the next sentence until I have the first sentence perfect. And I would say, I don't know how you do that because, I just, how do you get it perfect the first time? But he said, no, you have to do it like that. But anyway, the point is, I would read his dissertation. In my memory, it was the first 3 chapters that he showed me. And then after that, he didn't offer to show me any further writing. And I kind of noticed that he was becoming more quiet about his thesis. And the last conversation I had with him about the thesis was in Oxford. He was getting ready to write the final chapter, and as we all know, he suddenly left before he could write that chapter. But he was asking me how to do this. He was very concerned because this final chapter was going to be about prayojana, how Srila Prabhupada presents prayojana in our tradition. Probably most, if not all of you on this call have read his book, A Living Theology of Krishna Bhakti, which, of course, as you know, Garuda Prabhu finally edited and then added a final chapter. But I personally cherish the time when he was sort of on the beginning stages of the voyage of this book. And what was so striking to me was how he was making this balancing act. He was enacting what we were both struggling with, but he was enacting this balancing act of being a follower, a faithful follower of Srila Prabhupada, and at the same time presenting Prabhupada to an academic public as if from a distance, taking some distance. And how he was able to do that was really quite incredible. Just this morning I was reading some of his chapter on Sambandha, in which he's explaining how Prabhupada comes to the expression, Krishna, the Supreme Personality. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it's just so eloquent and so rich and so, so thorough. So I can understand how, from that perspective, I feel his departure is, just taking that into account, what to speak of all the other ways, his departure, he must have been in really high demand in the spiritual world. That's all I can say. Otherwise, there would have been plenty for him to continue doing here in Prabhupada's mission. So, anyone have a further comment or question?
Maharaj interacted with some young scholars in Oxford, like Ravi Gupta, and there seemed to be a nice relationship he had with some of those devotee scholars. Can you comment on that?
Okay, well, just that Goswami Maharaj was. I think he recognized from the beginning of his sort of venturing into the academic world And I think we both had this understanding because especially because we were late starters, essentially. We may not be able to do so much as ourselves in the academic world, but what we can do is give some sort of encouragement, some sort of guidance to younger devotees. And so, as you said, Radhika Raman was there. You know, Radhika Raman and I started out in Oxford exactly the same time, doing exactly the same course together, with the difference that he was 17 years old and I was, 48 by that time, maybe? 47. So, yes, the younger devotees, and I could see that he was very attuned to that need to give guidance for devotees who would have the aptitude and the inclination to pursue some sort of academic work related to our tradition, that it would be very important for him to help them. Yes, and you were there memorably, Prabhu, in both as Maharaja's servant. You were there in the Willow House and then also in Oxford. I suppose you've told all your stories already from those times. No?
Not so much, but I really appreciated the love that the young devotees had for Maharaj and you also. And there was kind of a family feeling in Oxford, which I didn't fully experience, but I know that we would sometimes go to lectures together and things like that. And
Yeah. I mean, those were really wonderful days. It was unfortunately just too short. Sarvabhauma Prabhu was there, and I also another thing I remember now. One of the last things that Goswami Maharaj told me before he left for India for his fateful trip is he was really looking forward to finishing his dissertation, finishing his study, and then going to India. And he wanted to go to Govardhan. And he wanted to just sit in Govardhan. He said, I just want to sit there. I just want to be there for 6 months. And he said to me, I want you to come also. That was really touching. I want you to be there also.
Rati Manjari Prabhu, say something.
Yes, Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. I've been hearing everything. Just
Hare
running
Krishna.
around doing things here, but listening intently, and I really enjoyed your realizations and your memories with Goswami Maharaj. Thank you for feeding us, so to speak. I remember hearing that you wrote a beautiful article in the Journal of Vaishnava Studies about his departure. And I was wondering if you want to reiterate a few points that you brought up. And also, I would love to have that digitally. I was trying to look for that edition online, but I can't find it. And I would love to have it if you have it digitally or scanned or something. I would love to have that, or I think many of us would love to have it.
Yeah. If I'm given an address to send it to, I can send it. Yeah.
Maybe to Nityananda Prabhu's address. Nityananda, is that a good idea?
I could, yeah. Maharaj, I could.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you can maybe post it somehow on the TKG Sangha or in our news groups or everything. Then people can benefit from it.
Yes. It's been a while since I wrote it and a while since I've reread it. But one point that I made toward the end of that was a kind of broad reflection of a somewhat anthropological sort. I said that as I experienced Goswami Maharaj, he was I sort of suggested categories of a community. There are the juniors, there are the seniors, and then there are the elders, and then there are the ancestors. And I said that Goswami Maharaj was a senior who was becoming an elder. And my article focused on his comments in his talk at Bhaktivedanta Manor in that very last occasion on Vasant Panchami, because the occasion was also the occasion of his taking sannyas in Jaipur. What was it at that time? 30 years? I don't remember now.
Yeah.
Yeah, 30-year anniversary of his taking sannyas. So he was being very reflective and openly, kind of reflecting on his life, and I share about that. But I say at the end that to me he was a senior becoming an elder, and that unfortunately Krishna took him, and so we didn't have the opportunity to have him as an elder in our society. But he immediately became an ancestor.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a kind of interesting range of ideas that he expressed in that talk, and very cogent, very weighty points he was making, I remember, about, because it was the disappearance day of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Srila Raghunath Das Goswami, as I remember. So he was kind of he was the last to speak. We'd all spoken something, and then he spoke, and he was kind of bringing it all together and saying how fortunate we are to be in this tradition. And he wanted to bring out that we need to take advantage of the whole tradition. And I don't know how much devotees caught what he was saying, because some of what he was saying was a little bit radical for ISKCON, at least at the time. Yes, we have Prabhupada, and yes, we see the tradition through Prabhupada, but we also see the Prabhupada through the tradition. Something like that.
Going back to the dissertation again, I had this realization that particularly as the dawn of Srila Gurudev's appearance on this planet was happening, that he was becoming more accommodating of other people's point of view about what Srila Prabhupada really represented to all of us. And so when you say that in that final chapter on Prayojana, I can see the challenge he would face, that he had himself very strong views about Srila Prabhupada's legacy. But at the same time, was becoming very mindful. Well, he was, but he certainly started expressing a lot more mindfulness about other people's point of view, how others saw Prabhupada in a different way from how he might have seen I'm thinking because he was so close to you, would you like to reveal some of the things he might have told you about what his view was on Prayojana? Because that would be very interesting to know how he personally felt about that. And we all have some ideas, but you know, you were really close to him. And so it'd be very interesting to hear from you. What was his outlook?
Well, as I was saying, he kind of, in that stage, he was, I don't want to say he was withdrawing altogether. I think he may have just been shifting, sharing to share with others than me. He was also like that. He would, he would have close friends in sort of different compartments, almost, if it's appropriate to say that. And perhaps he didn't feel that I was the one to share those thoughts with. I mean, I did see with him an ongoing struggle that he had a really deep desire to have a deeper realization of Krishna consciousness, which he felt was not being facilitated in ISKCON. And we all know at one point he spent a lot of time with Bhaktivedanta Narayan Maharaj, and explained to me about that also. He said, I spent time with him, I followed him, because I need a strong guide. He felt the need for a strong guide, and he was comparing, because he said he was also a bit dissatisfied with the academic guidance that he was getting in Cambridge, because the academic guidance he was getting at Southern Methodist University was very strong, and he really liked that. And he was not getting that. He was getting encouragement in Cambridge. He was like, and I think he was getting similar experience to mine in Oxford, where I had a wonderful, amazing doctoral supervisor. But he would only encourage me and say, yes, that's very nice, keep going, keep writing. He wouldn't challenge, but what about this, what about this? So that sense was there. But what I saw in that kind of final conversation we had about his final chapter, he really seemed to be genuinely asking how to do this, how to approach it. Of course, many times he had this way of provoking devotees to say something and keep talking until they would say something that he would say, yes, that's right, that's it, which is what also Srila Prabhupada would do, to try to draw out from somebody else what he's looking for, and then, yes, that's it. But he never quite got it from me. I wasn't up to muster for that. Sorry to say.
Could you say maybe a little how his final work was received academically?
I wish that I could. It took a full 10 years before it was finally published. Why that happens, hard to say. I mean, perhaps Yudhishthira probably knows better than I all the ins and outs of that. But
I can only comment that Garuda Prabhu is, he readily admits that he gets stacked up with projects.
Yes, yeah, I know.
He also, has stated many times to me, but at least I come through in the end.
Yeah.
I would really like to hear, Maharaj, if you could, 20 years later, share your perspective on the various branches of Lord Chaitanya's tree. And with the maturing of ISKCON over these years, I mean, I'm not asking you to be, Prabhupada differentiated between philosophical speculation and mental speculation. He encouraged philosophical speculation. So the question would be, in the bigger picture, do you think that more respect and appreciation and interactions with the various branches of Lord Chaitanya's tree, especially in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, our tradition through Bhakti Siddhanta and Bhakti Vinod Thakur would be would it be encouraged? Prabhupada protected everyone in the early days because, it seems everyone was so young and immature relatively.
Yeah.
Maybe you could comment on that.
Okay.
Touchy subject, I know that.
It's okay. I wrote a short article on this topic, exactly this topic, really, some years back. The BBT commissioned articles which they posted on a website, and it was under a subheading called Tough Ones. And we were each asked to address particular topics that were perhaps controversial with respect to statements Prabhupada has made in his books or like that. So I was asked to write something about Prabhupada and his relation to his godbrothers. And I did this by focusing on two verses and purports in Chaitanya Charitamrita, in Adi Lila chapter, I think they're both in chapter 10, or maybe one's in 10, one's in 12, whatever. So in one of those, Krishnadas Kaviraj is speaking about the branches of the Chaitanya tree. And Prabhupada, in a very short purport, says, ISKCON is one of the branches of the Chaitanya tree. And I sort of expound on that point. And I say that if we're really looking at the analogy, the extended analogy of a tree with branches, with fruit, and so on, then there's certain implications of that we should consider. Now, when Prabhupada wrote that, his emphasis, clearly from other purports, is to say, we are bona fide, we are also a branch. And so we should be recognized as such. But what I want to do in this article was kind of the inverse, and address ISKCON devotees and say, we're a branch of this tree, and there are so many other branches. And because there's so many other branches, maybe we could appreciate them. And Prabhupada's main critique of his godbrothers at that time was that they were not preaching, but very much inspired, one might want to argue entirely inspired by Srila Prabhupada. They're now preaching. Some of them are, preaching. So shouldn't we acknowledge, and shouldn't we encourage, and can't we interact with our greater family? Basically, that's the point that I make. So yeah, I would say Goswami Maharaj would agree with that. This reminds me, incidentally, he and I co-authored an article or a paper which then he presented at the American Academy of Religion. I was not personally present, I was in India at that time. But the panel for which we wrote was a panel within the Hinduism section of the American Academy of Religion conference, where the theme was practitioner scholars. I forget how it was worded, but it was something about this point of being a practitioner and being a scholar, how to deal with that. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj and I sort of co-authored this article, and really I would say I did 1/3 of the article and he did the other 2/3. But in this article, we suggested some things which, especially he was suggesting some things that were a bit radical, or maybe very radical, for ISKCON devotees to take. Sometime later, after the departure of Goswami Maharaj, I don't remember how many years, it came to the notice of some senior devotees, because it had been published. The article was published in this book that was edited by Edwin Bryant about the Hare Krishna movement, and it was raising their eyebrows to the extent that they brought it up to the GBC. We were in trouble. And I was called on the carpet. I mean, not into a plenary session, but to a committee. And I was thinking at the time, Maharaj, you got me in trouble. Why have you done this to me? I was just helping you out in your article, and now I'm the one who has to defend. What is this? That was how I felt. As it turned out, that's a bit longer story, but it all worked out very well in the end. In fact, I didn't have to discuss the article at all. I found a way to work around it altogether. I wanted to make this point about feeling Goswami Maharaj's presence with another incident. It was mentioned by you in the beginning, Nityananda Prabhu, that I taught at Chinese University of Hong Kong. The reason that happened was largely because of Goswami Maharaj. I had just finished teaching at University of Florida for a year, as arranged by Brahmatirtha Prabhu. I came back to Oxford. I was kind of settling in, and a phone call came from Amogalila Prabhu in Berkeley. How would you like to go and teach for a year in Hong Kong? And I said, what? Hong Kong? Are you kidding? And he said, no, really. And he explained it was a whole arrangement that suddenly appeared, sort of handed to the devotees an opportunity. And Amogalila Prabhu was supposed to go and teach, but it all happened too quickly for him. Being a grihasta, he said, I can't just, close shop here with my family and move to, so I need a year to adjust everything. And first I said, Hong Kong, forget it. I mean, why Hong Kong? And then he said, oh, well, it's too bad that you don't want to do this, because it's inspired by Tamal Krishna Goswami. And when he said that, I said, all right, where do I sign up? Because I felt like, he was kind of breathing down my neck, saying, you got to take this opportunity. I've arranged this for you. Come on. And so I did. And then I feel also that it was he who inspired me. I actually could have continued. I could have done much more in Hong Kong. But I felt, no, I've sort of done, been there, done that. I've sort of done what I can do in Hong Kong. now I should see what I can do in mainland China. And so I ended my teaching in Hong Kong and started making these sort of freelance visiting in mainland China, which started to get some momentum. I started making, quite some promising connections. So the present situation has been quite a frustration for me because I don't know if I'll be able to pick up the ball after this period of time. But again, it was feeling always I can serve Tamal Krishna Maharaj this way.
Maharaj, we cannot express our gratitude enough to you for coming on like this and speaking to us and really nourishing us so much. We can continue this if you'd like to stay longer, but we didn't want to hold you up any more than we had to with this program.
Well, I've pretty much sort of dug out all the specific memories that I have, so maybe it's a good time to end.
Okay.
Yeah, but I've noted email address of you, Yudhishthira Prabhu, and you, Nityananda Prabhu, and I can send you that article.
Thank you, Maharaj. I'd love to hear from you and perhaps beg some time.
Say again?
So I'd love to hear from you and perhaps beg some time.
Some time.
Some time to speak. Yeah.
You mean just you and I speaking? Yes, I'd be happy to do that. Yeah. Okay.
And Maharaj, as I said in the beginning, please do visit us here in Texas.
Yes.
Nice center in Houston. More than be happy to have you over with us. Host you here, Maharaj. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'd like to come over. I was intending to come to America just when the pandemic hit, and I got stuck first in India and then here in Poland. So let's see.
Thank you again, Maharaj, for your time.
Hare Krishna. Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj ki jai.
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
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 Premanande.
Swami Maharaj ki jai.
Hi, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.